and then we'll just go through. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It's Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. We're here today for a virtual working session on Docket 0173, Petition for a Special Law Regarding an Act Regarding the Disability Pension for Harry Jean. Docket 0174, Petition for a Special Law Regarding an Act Regarding the Disability Pension for Ryan Lenane. And Docket 0175, Petition for a Special Law Regarding an Act Regarding the Disability Pension for Terry Cotton. These matters were referred to the committee on January 13, 2021. These matters are actually refiles from 2020. We had a hearing on them. We heard from the officers in 2020. And as part of trying to close out 2020's business, we decided to start right away with a working session in 2021. Again, the hearing we actually held was on September 24th. And again, we heard testimony from the officers then. So if anyone wants to hear from the officers directly about their incidences, we're not going to have them go through and talk about that again. That is available for you upon request. It's public information, and you can go through that and watch that hearing. All the officers discussed the impact of the injuries on their lives. The committee discussed the statutory standard for accidental disability. All of the officers are retired under accidental disability. The committee discussed the impact and trauma the officers deal with as a result of being injured in the line of duty. The committee also discussed similar home rule petitions that were approved in the past. In accordance with Governor Baker's executive order, we're modifying the open meeting. He modified the open meeting laws, which allows the city council to carry out its responsibilities on Zoom. And so this public may watch this meeting live via live stream, at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Quick summary. These are home rule petitions, which means they must be passed by the city council and then ultimately go to the state house. And they are requesting to increase the accidental disability retirement allowable payable to the officers named individually in each proposal. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 32, Section 7, governs the accidental disability retirement allowance and currently allows for a yearly amount of pension equal to 72% of the annual rate of an officer's regular compensation. This proposal will increase the retirement allowance to the rate of the compensation that the officer would have received had such officer continued service as a police officer, essentially going from 72 to 100%. All other provisions of Chapter 32 will apply except for Section 91A, as long as any income is not earned performing a sworn law enforcement function. That the home rule petitions also provide for the surviving spouse as follows: an annuity in the amount of 3/4 of the amount of the pension payable to the officer per month at the time of the officer's death, if the surviving spouse remains unmarried. And if said surviving spouse remarries, the city shall pay in lieu of the aforesaid 3/4 or 75% of the officer's salary, an annuity of $550 per month. The statutory standard for accidental disability retirement is physically unable to perform the essential duties and responsibilities of the job and that such inability is likely or deemed permanent before attaining the maximum age of the members group by reason of personal injury or violent act injury sustained by a hazard undergone as a result and while in the performance of the officer's duties. That's section 32, number 7, section 7. I wanted to just further break down a little bit more of any of the exceptions. I think Jesse will be sending out kind of a breakdown, if he hasn't already. Jesse is my policy director, a breakdown of the laws so that my colleagues, I'm trying to be like Professor Box, not as well, but trying to break down, I guess, if you will, a more clarifying comparison chart so that my colleagues can see the law and the exceptions that's providing. I also in that chart explain what we've done before and also what is different today, if there are any differences. So that I know Councillor Flaherty is our resident historian, our Councillor Bach is our doctorate historian, but just so people know, when we're talking about what we've done before, we actually have that all in one piece of paper. I didn't want us to be, flinging off of memory. So I don't know if Jesse sent that out yet. I also wanted to let folks know who our special guests are today. We have, I believe, Larry Calderon from the Boston Patrolman Police Association, or representative thereof. We have Donald Casey from the Boston Police Detectives Benevolent Society, or representative thereof. We have Padraig Leiden from the Boston Retirement Board. We have Timothy Smith from the Boston Retirement Board. We have Michael Collins from the Disability Survivor Retirement Board. And we have Pam Kulcher from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. And I believe I have Martin O'Malley as well. They all may be coming in or out or submitting testimony, but they were asked to be here to make sure that we had a full comprehensive discussion. I'm going to announce my colleagues in order of arrival, and then I'll turn it over to Councillor Anissa Sabi-George. 1 second, just making sure I have the final. Yep. Okay, we have Councillor Sabi-George, who is the lead sponsor. We have Councillor Flynn, Councillor Bach, Councillor Braden, and Councillor Flaherty. Of course, myself. Am I missing anybody? Okay, so Councillor Sabi-George.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for being here today for this working session regarding Terry, Harry, and Ryan, 3 Boston police officers who were shot in the line of duty. 2, Harry and Terry on August 7, 2013, and Ryan on December 7th, 2013. All 3 served our city well and with distinction, and were shot in the line of duty. As I mentioned, they were terribly injured. And all 3 have been retired out as because of their injuries, both physical and emotional injury. I am grateful, Madam Chair, that we don't have the police officers present, as they have already offered their testimony in length last year, and that today is a working session based on some of the efforts to improve this home rule petition prior to passage and sending it up to the State House. This petition that's before you has all 3 officers. It directs all 3 officers or the retirement board to retire them out at 100% as opposed to the 72% that they are currently at. It will provide no cap to their potential future earnings, but also a stipulation that they are not involved in law enforcement duties in any potential future employment. That particular note is important to me, as all 3 men are fairly young and similar in age to me. So I do think that they, if they should have the opportunity for additional employment, that they have that opportunity. I think that it's really important, as police officers who served our city and were injured pretty significantly while on the job, all shot in the line of duty, that we are supportive of their efforts for wholeness, I suppose, and that's the effort that I have underway and why I've presented these petitions. I'm grateful for colleagues who have informed the petitions to date, and happy to have that discussion here in this working session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and go in order of arrival to each one of my colleagues, and then we can go to our guests. for some testimony, and then we'll go back for questions. So, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you, Councillor Asabi George. I also want to acknowledge central staff and the members of the retirement board that are here as well, including Tim Smith. I had the opportunity to thoroughly review the documents for all three, rather, of the police officers, Harry Jean, Ryan Lenane, and Terry Cotton. And I don't have any questions. I don't have any concerns. I read the documents thoroughly, and will be in support of providing them the respect and the dignity. They were willing to risk their lives, the residents of Boston. So I'm just going to be, and that's all I have to say for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Councillor Asabi George. I was also at the hearing back in September and read all the documentation, and I think glad that we're in this working session today. I think it's important. It's really important for us to recognize the human reality of this and the human cost for the men and their families, and also really important for us as a council to make sure that we're doing things when we make sort of special laws, which are what these are, that we're doing things that sort of we can feel comfortable doing consistently across the board whenever a similar case arises. So glad to just have a chance to dig a little bit into the weeds today. And that's it for me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Braden.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I too had an opportunity to review all the documentation. I did attend the hearing in September, and I like Councillor Bach, I'd like to get a better understanding. I'm a new councillor, and this is the first time get a better understanding of the process here, and to get a standard practice across the board, so that going forward, when future cases come up, that we'll have a clear path to awarding compensation as necessary. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty, Councillor Flaherty, you there?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just obviously to appreciate the lead sponsor's efforts on this, and matter has been fully vetted, and it's in good working order. All the proper paperwork is there. All the individuals have retired in proper form. So looking forward to probably more or less hearing from Tim Smith and Porrick, who, by the way, do phenomenal work on behalf of our city and the retirement board. I just want that note. But look forward to supporting these three petitions. Anything else that our retirement board has to offer, any insight would be helpful, obviously, to some of our members. So I appreciate your efforts here as well, Madam Chair. It's been a long process with hearings and working sessions, but looks as though we've got everything in good working order, and looking forward to having a committee report.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. And I'll just conclude by saying I agree with Councillor Bach and Councillor Braden in that we should be thinking about the precedent that this sets. These are, again, three individual dockets, though it made more sense to have the conversation about all of them together. They should be judged on their individual merits, and each one of you have packets and information and can watch the video hearing from the officers. But this is about how we move forward as we are expecting another 4 potential officers to come through as well this year. And historically, as Councillor Flaherty had once let us know, we, since 2000 and I think 95 actually, have only done about 5 of these total. Right? And so here we're potentially setting a standard for these 3, and then potentially another 4 or 7 to come. And so it is not just enough for us as a body to think about this as these ones. I think we should also be sure about we are fair in our assessment. We are fair in our practice. Honestly, Councillor Asabi George really nailed it and how we even treat officers when they come to discuss their pain in front of us, and the standard we should even have for that. So, you know, as chair, part of my learning is that one, if they come in and they tell their story and they're not subject to peppering or to cross-examination in any way, shape, or form, that they can speak their story, and we have that. That's one thing I want to promote going forward. The other thing is that we are fully versed in the laws and the financial impact of them, which is why Research Municipal Bureau is here and other folks as well. Also, just want to break down again the laws. So we have 32, section 32, and then the matrix, you'll see that goes to 100%. Then you see that there are exceptions that are asked for in the current home rule petition that weren't asked for before. That's exceptions to 32, section 91A. The other part that I noticed in research is, and I think we would agree, is it's actually chapter 91 that would prevent the officers from working, I think, in municipal government or for government and law enforcement. But right now, as written, it would just kind of, I think, apply just to private law enforcement. So if we wanted a comprehensive, like, you know, that's also up there. And then there's the cap, which is, I know that was is controversial for a lot of people, that a person could retire at 100% and also be able to make however much money they can make in another job as well, with no cap. While other folks who have a cap, it's $15,000. So I wanted that to be clear, because again, those are the details and those are the standards that we should be discussing and we should be setting and be informed about when we make those standards. This is not a yes or no. This is a let's be clear about what we're doing conversation. And that's why it's very important for me, especially doing this for the first time. So to counselor, or excuse me. So again, we have special guests. All right, we have some guests here today to discuss the proposals and maybe explain or answer any questions. And I'm going to call you all out individually, and you are free to just say you're here to answer any questions, or that you have an opening statement, or that you'd like to do whatever. So Larry Calderon from the Boston Patrolmen's Association.
I don't see him on the screen,
Okay.
Madam.
Is there a representative from the BPPA? Okay. Is Detective Donald Casey available?
I do see Martin O'Malley here from the Detectives Union.
Oh, my apologies, Martin, Officer O'Malley. My apologies.
All right, good morning, ma'am. Let me start off by speaking on behalf of the Boston Police Detectives Benevolent Society. I would most certainly like to start off by thanking you, Councilor Edwards, for your patience through this process. I know there was lots of confusion during this process. I would also like to thank Council Flaherty for his guidance and bestowing his experience on us, as well as obviously Councilor Asabi George for her work on these different docket numbers. I would also like to thank the different councilors that took the time out of their busy schedules to take phone calls from us and listen to us. We certainly understand that this is very tough to explain the different nuances of Harry Jean's injuries, you know, through a quick glimpse of what's going on and by reading his medical records. But I will say that Harry Jean is a city kid, a black male from the city that's of Haitian descent. I did not know Harry for several years. I would just see Harry in court or on different duties as a police officer. And Harry was always the guy that would shoot a smile at you and he'd light up the room. That was Harry. I've sat in Harry's disability hearing with him. I've talked to him on several occasions. And I regrettably say that, you know, Harry is now a shell of the man he was as a result of the injuries that he has sustained. So I thank you all for your time.
Thank you. We have Patrick Leiden from the Boston Retirement Board.
Hi, Council Redwoods. I'm here to answer questions and whatever's necessary. I defer to Tim. Thank you.
Very well then. Timothy Smith from the Boston Retirement Board.
Good morning, Counselor. Like Park, we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Michael Collins for the Disability Supervisor from the Boston Retirement Board.
He was unfortunately could not make it this morning, Counsel.
All right, no problem. And then we have Pam Kocher from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau.
Yes, hi, Pam Coker here. Just as
I'm going to get your
the others,
I promise.
Sure. As the others just said, I'm happy to be asked to sit in to help if there's any questions that I can answer.
Excellent. So we're going to go through a round of questions. We could start with the lead sponsor.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. As the lead sponsor and as we've spent, you and I and a number of us have spent basically almost a year on these dockets and redrafting and drafting what we have presented today. I don't have additional questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Flynn had announced that he is supportive and did not have any questions. Councillor Bach.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I had a few questions. So one was just, and this might be for Mr. Smith, but just to understand the additional financial liability, is it paid directly from the city side of the Boston Retirement Board? Like, how does it, like, whose money are we using to fund this? If you could just walk us through a little bit when these do go through, and obviously maybe taking the 4 that have gone in recent years as a benchmark. How do you guys handle those?
Sure. The cost is borne directly by the city of Boston, not by the Boston Retirement System. It does not play any part of our pension liability. It is paid directly each month through an account down at Treasury. The retirement system does administer the benefit, meaning we issue the checks, we keep track of everything, but the financial burden falls purely with the city of Boston.
And is that so for instance, here where we'd be going from 72% to 100, is it that remaining 28% that gets covered direct by Treasury, and then the original 72% is coming through the normal retirement board process, or?
No, it's completely borne by the city, and I think it requires, if you don't mind, a little explanation.
That'd be great.
These folks go from what's called Fund 1, which is the typical contributory retirement payroll, which is paid by the Boston Retirement System, to what's called Fund 2. Fund 2 is what we call non-contributory retirees, meaning their annuity portion was paid back to them. Usually it's in the language in the special acts, or if it's a line of duty of death, it's in the statute, and then it's paid directly by the city. So we've segmented them from our population for that reason, because the city of Boston pays the benefit in total. Now, they are considered retirees in these special acts touched upon Section 91A, and I did hear some discussion about 91 small b. They also get COLAs like any other retirees. Short of that, though, they are somewhat unique. And currently in that Fund 2, we have 58 members, but that also includes surviving spouses of line of duty death. And believe it or not, there's about 27 retirees and beneficiaries from the 1950s. Way back in the day, if you retired, I can't remember the date off the top of my head, 1958 is jumping out at me, but if you retired before that date, you would be issued your annuity account back and put on the pension payroll. But that, obviously, that benefit has been repealed, and we're down to 27 people. The average age is about 95 for that population.
Wow. Okay. So those 27 are from the 50s.
Correct.
So it's sort of
They-
20, there's 27 from the 50s, and then another, like, that leaves 31 folks, some of whom are surviving spouses. So in
So there's 24, if I can I'm sorry to interrupt you, Council. There's 24 special acts, and then there are 7 combination of special act beneficiaries or Section 100, which is line of duty beneficiaries. And these statistics come from the latest GASB valuation of June 30, 2020. So it could be a slightly off because there may have been a death or two, but it's pretty close.
Got it. Great. And I think it would be great if those could get to the council for the record. Just
Thank you.
when you have a chance. But sorry, I think there's a point that I'm still confused on, which is the normal, because there's already an act of the legislature, right? This Mass General Laws, Chapter 32, Section 7, that deals with folks who go out, retire on disability, that gives them the 72% of the regular rate. So, but those folks seem to me like they've also switched the situation, right? Because they're not contributory. So where are those people who haven't had a special act, but they are covered under that?
I just need to correct, they are contributory, the accidental disabilities.
Okay.
And just another point to make, everybody says 72%, that's a little bit of a misnomer. It's 72% plus we factor in the annuity. If you have a membership date after 1988, that's capped at 75%. If your membership date is prior to 1988, there is no cap. So I've seen cases where the annuity gets factored in and it's upwards of 80%.
But in the case of these are younger officers, so
What are
probably
they?
that wouldn't apply, right? We're probably looking at all after 88. I don't know that for sure, but
Could we confirm that actually
yeah, it would be worth.
before you go? Does this 88, is it 72 or 75?
After 88, they're capped at 75%.
So
Right. But are these 3 officers, do we have their dates?
These 3 I'd have to double check, but I think at least 2 of them would be capped.
I would imagine. I think all 3, if memory serves, but I'm not sure. And then can I ask I'm looking now at Councilor Edwards's chart. So one question I have is on survivor benefits. It looks like the 32.7, the regular law has a spouse getting a survivor and children, if they're left orphaned, getting benefits. And the same with the ones we did in 0405, but we don't have that stipulation in these. Councilor Asabi George or others, can you speak to sort of why that difference here?
I'm not sure why this difference on surviving children. Is that what you're asking the question? I'm sorry, as opposed to just a spouse?
No, it looked like on both fronts. So, do you have Councilor Edwards's chart in front of you?
I don't. Is that inbox from Jesse?
Inbox from Jesse, yeah. So this suggests, and Councilor Edwards, maybe, I don't know if you had any clarity on this, just because it suggests here that there are survivor benefits in the existing law, and also there were surviving benefits in the 0405 acts that aren't on this. And now there's 2 different possibilities. One is that the survivor benefits of
are in here.
7 are still applying, and so we don't need to put that in our conditions.
We didn't show an exception, right?
So is that what's
So-
going on, Councilor Edwards?
Yeah. So
Okay.
the chart, sorry, I haven't quite perfected my Professor Bach demonstration of charts. But yes, so I apologize for that confusion. I will, you know what, I can have Jesse reiterate and do that chart real quick for you.
So there's no difference.
I don't happen to have that in my inbox, this chart, unless is it the same from December?
No,
Yeah,
it was just
I don't
done this
have-
morning to help out, which it didn't. So I will.
I don't have it anyway, so.
So strike my question about survivor benefits. Sounds like we've got consistency there. So then the financial certification and financial documentation piece, what's sort of the theory behind having a different, more relaxed set of requirements in these than in the in 3291A.
Sorry, Counselor Bach, I was trying to pull up that email. I missed the question.
So setting aside the question of an earnings cap,
Yeah.
just the question of financial documentation and certification requirements that exist under the current law, what sort of, and that it sounds like we didn't exempt people from in the 0405 ones. What is the thinking on that front?
So is that the reevaluation is mandated through state law? So that will continue as prescribed through state law? There's no exemption on that.
Okay, well then I guess the question is for Counselor Edwards. What do you think is the distinction that's being made in this? On the financial
Oh,
certification?
you're muted, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I was just checking in with Dusty on the chart. You were asking specifically about what the exception was?
Yeah, on financial certification and documentation, what's your understanding of the difference that we're setting up here?
By asking for an exception, that we're not getting those things. That we're no earning, those are different. I guess what I'm trying to say is we've not asked for them, or by asking for an exception, they're not asking they're asking to be exempt from those following things.
Okay, but so what I'm confused about is one, and I'm sorry, I know this is all technical.
Nope.
Here we are. So what I'm confused about is, so in my head at least, like reevaluation is.
So the difference would be like in 2004, they didn't do those exceptions. This time we're putting in those exceptions. That's what we're trying to show. So in 2004, they kind of just did straight 100 and survival benefits. This year, we're doing also an exception to 91A with those things being applied. Does that make sense? 3291A. So 2021 has 100, exception to 3291A, and does have survivor benefits. In 2004, 2005, the previous 5 cases that we've had only 100% in the survival benefits. That's the difference. There was no cap asked for in 2004 in the previous cases. There was no unable to work in law enforcement. There was no other exceptions. It was just straight 100 and spouses taken care of in 2004 in the previous cases. We're asking for more exceptions now in these cases, that they do not have to do the following things.
Yeah, so I see. Because the language is except section 91A of said chapter 32 shall not apply. Okay, I think I might have a follow-up question on that, but I think I just want to go read the section. So I think I'll stop my questions for now. That's okay.
Counselor Braden.
I need some time to look at the documents. I'm just wondering, did Jess send over the, I still haven't got it in my inbox.
Okay. All right.
So move on. Thank you.
Counselor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess to Tim Smith. Tim, if you can refresh my memory, I thought a few years ago, as it pertained to the firefighters, we eliminated the remarriage penalty. And I'm looking at this chart here, and it looks as though it says 3/4 goes to the spouse if remaining unmarried. And the theory being that we should not be punishing widows in these situations. So I guess I want to get your thought on that. I know that we moved for BFD. I thought we included BPD, but.
Thank you for the question. The remarriage penalty was removed by amendment. Thankfully, it goes across the board to every Chapter 32 member. I hope that's
so in that chart. So yes, thank you, Tim. So in that chart, as you see how it reads, is that no longer the case? So should that be stricken?
You can make sure the language doesn't do that, but we just followed what we saw in the law. So if it's been stricken in another section of the law, then it should apply. the removal of the penalty should apply. But we'll make sure the language is very clear on that we don't quote or don't apply an antiquated version of the law in removing the spousal or the surviving spouse penalty.
That's me, Madam Chair.
Clarity?
Yes, the theory obviously being that in a situation of a spouse widow left behind, that they should not be punished in the event that they wanted to sort of move forward. We saw a lot of situations where spouses would remain, would be in committed relationships, but would not be able to marry because they would be punished financially for that. So I think that was sort of the theory behind that. But again, I just want to raise that because I saw it in the chart and the graph there.
Okay, thank you. So spouse, you would want to make sure that that's confirmed, that no one is punished for remarrying. I have also, well, I had some questions now too. Are you all set, Councilor Flaherty?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so just wanted to go back. I want to make sure we're clear on each one of the exceptions. So we can send out chapter or section 91A if that's what people think makes sense. But in as much as the language is granting exceptions to it, it's granting exceptions to several things, which include the cap, which include all of these different kinds of forms of affidavits, financial certification, et cetera, et cetera. And it may make sense, honestly, if you are getting rid of the cap, what do you need proof of income and what do you need the back and forth for, right? So I think that's the point. I think I want to have that debate financially, fiscally, about removing the cap as a standard, which we have not done before. And we should have that. So I don't know if we want to talk with Pam Cooker from the Research Municipal Bureau about the financial implications of doing that, of in general granting a lifetime 100% disability benefits. And normally I understand the organization is a fiscal watchdog on this, and I understood there was some testimony or some thoughts about this before the previous hearing. So I'm curious, as a fiscal watchdog, well, what do you see here?
Yeah, sure. So I think it was last summer when I first testified on this matter. A couple of the things that the Research Bureau is looking at with the dynamics that are at play here include that good public policy will address a particular issue or problem in a standard way without creating special one-off deals or enhancements for individuals who can get approval for example, a special disability pension enhancement. And then another comment that I made then that I want to put out here again today is just the increase in cost. At the time that I testified, I think last summer, there were 7 employees that were being proposed for consideration for these special pension enhancements. So at the time, I took a quick look at what the cost might be. And for each of those individuals, it would have been.
Of course, she brings
an additional benefit of $550 for each individual. That equals $6,600 per year. And then over 10 years for all 7 of those employees originally presented for disability pension enhancements, it would be almost $500,000 over 10 years. So we see a couple of things here.
Pam, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Literally right before you said the first number, you froze. So if you could go through and break down the cost again, because we caught you at the end.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, I am having some internet issues. So if it happens again, I'm happy to just, I don't know if I can like type in an email to someone on your staff and have those notes available, or reach out afterwards. I'm happy to send a note with what would have been my testimony. Okay, so quickly to beat the internet connection from breaking off again. Costs for these special pensions. based on what information we have this summer, the cost for an individual from the benefit they would get of these increased or enhanced pensions would be $550 per month for the individual. That's $6,600 per year additional for the individual. For all 7, that would be the cost of the system would be $46,200 per month. Or per year, excuse me, per year. And then for 7, the 7 proposed for to receive this additional benefit, for all 7, the total over the 10 years would be just under $500,000, $462,000. So pointing out here just that exceptions for specific people do carry costs, and those costs can grow over the year and add to overall liabilities for the city. And the more exceptions that are made outside of the standard pension system, with the different types of retirements that are allowed now, the more we have more exceptions to the rule. And what does that say about the precedent within the public safety departments about the next 7 people that get presented for an extra enhanced pension benefit because of their very unfortunate circumstances? And I'm certainly not personally, I'm certainly not looking to take anything away from somebody who has been hit with some very difficult circumstances related to their job. But I have experience working with folks who have been heavily injured on the job and wanting to better understand how they're getting the support that they need to financially and in terms of physical therapy or whatever else they need to try to recover from those injuries. And I know that that can be incredibly difficult and frustrating. But as the Research Bureau, when it comes down to trying to do provide additional resources to individuals outside of the standard system for all, we have concerns about that as a policy approach or a beyond policy approach. And we have concerns about that in terms of the increased financial responsibility that the system would then carry.
So just to follow up really quick to make sure I understand, you were calculating the part that the additional 28% that Boston would be responsible for in your calculation? When you talked about the additional cost of $550 a month.
Yep.
What was that?
I don't have my full notes in front of me, but that was my understanding is those were the benefits that we identified at the time that for an individual would be the increase per month on top of the pension benefits that they would already be getting because of their disability.
So
that's the cost of it.
Okay, so we were thinking that represented the additional that they're asking for, the additional ask that they're asking for, that gap. Because right now they're at 72.75 right now, and they're asking for 100. So the $550 was representing that 25%.
I believe it was representing the additional that they could possibly get. And in fact, maybe this is something that Councilor Asabi George can speak to a little bit better, because I am having a little trouble, I admit, right now, remembering how this got calculated. So if the proposal was to close that gap, then that's what we tried to calculate.
Thank you.
I'll have to go back in those previous notes as well, Pam, but I appreciate that testimony. I also appreciate your recognition of the significant and serious injury that these 3 officers experienced while on the job and in the line of duty. And I think that it is a fine line in which we navigate talking about the financial commitment to the city and the sacrifice that all 3 of these men made in the line of duty in pursuit of employment and a career that they had been committed to. I don't know exactly how many years each of them were on the job at the time of their injury, but it was many years of service to this city, and to have an abrupt end to those years of service, I think is a real note during this time. And also, since so many are bringing up the additional 4, when we originally presented this, there were 7 police officers who were shot in the line of duty who were either already out retired, which these 3 were, or the additional 4, and I think of the other 4 now, they are all fully retired, also shot in the line of duty, unable to return to work. So it's certainly important for us to come up with a template and sort of a strategy to approach anyone gravely injured in the line of duty. So this is an important conversation to have. And I do want to note and just reiterate how important it is for us to talk about the financial commitment and burden this places on the city. But I do not want to miss the burden that these 3 men that we're discussing today and their families deal with every single day. And the conversation around 100% is making them whole, but also not punishing them, because if they were active duty police officers today, they would not potentially be limited in making additional income outside of their role as police officer. If they owned a business, if they had a part-time job, if they had other commitments that they could, other skills, other talents and areas of expertise. We are in this petition limiting their ability to participate in law enforcement employment. And I do believe that this is the right thing for us to do as a city. And although it does come at a financial cost, I do think it's an appropriate action. I would also note, Madam Chair, that Larry Calderon has joined us.
Thank you. So I guess then I would like to turn then my questions to the retirement board specifically. I'm not comfortable, again, as we said before, it's about the standard that we're setting and how we approach this, because they're going to keep coming, and they should. And this is the process in which they have to come through, right? So we discussed how we want to balance officer trauma with actually being able to understand what happened. That's one way of making sure that we don't re-traumatize people when they talk about it. It could be officer, firefighters, whomever. So that's one set of standard that I want to be very clear. The other standard I want to have be part of our conversation is having the numbers and the financial impact on either a 10-year or 20-year impact of a person retiring at 100%. And I think that should be on, I don't know if the retirement board should present that, or I don't know if the Patrolman Association, but someone, before we're making a financial decision, we should have numbers in front of us. So I'm going to turn to the retirement board. I don't know if anyone's calculated the impact on each 3 of these cases.
Well, I can tell you that the from Fund 2 on that last GASB report, the yearly benefit was $3,954,000. But it sounds like what you're asking for is more of an actuarial memo or cost, which is something I'm not an actuary, but we do have them at the board, and it's something I would have to assign out to have done, which we're happy to do.
So the $3 million you meant is complete for everybody that gets on the fund, okay? Not for
Fund 2, right? For all the non-contributories, 3.9 million.
Okay. So yes, I do think if we're going to be part of the conversation about making fiscal decisions, and I don't think that I hope that the lead sponsor doesn't disagree. We should have, if you can assign that out and get the actuaries and show us what the impact is, then I think that would be a responsible analysis.
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine with that. I do think that's important information to have. I would note that we are hopefully moving with quickness on this, as we would like to get this petition in any form up to the State House quickly.
Thank you. To the retirement board, how fast could you get those actuaries to us for each of the individual officers?
I can speak to the actuary today. I don't know what her schedule is, but my experience is it's about a 1-month turnaround.
Okay.
Has this been done in the past, Tim, that we could have approximates sooner?
I don't think so, Counselor, on Fund 2, because they're not part of our pension liability. I'd have to double check with my comptroller, but probably not, because like I said at the very beginning, this is a city cost, so it's not something that the retirement board normally concerns itself with.
But of these other 58 members, there isn't a similar circumstance that we could base some of those dollars off of?
They're very unique. And, bear in mind, and it would be a difficult exercise too, because the way they're set up, every time there's a contractual raise, they enjoy the raise. So, what are they going to be making in 20 years? Who knows? I mean, there's certain assumptions that the actuaries make to get as close as possible.
Tim,
Not something the board would have.
One second, Kenzie, before you go, I just want to finish up some more questions real quick. So I wanted to then go into the exceptions asked for today. How many cases have you seen where there have been no caps?
For the Boston special acts, I'd have to go reread them all, but I think this is the first time.
No caps on side. Okay.
I think they're all subject to the cap, right? What you're trying to do is make them not subject to the cap, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I'm not aware of that exception in any of the other special acts, but again, I'll be happy to reread them all.
We've been joined by Council President Janey as well. Councilor Janey, if you want, after this quick set of questioning, I'm happy to have you do any brief opening remarks.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm good.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I don't know if Mr. O'Malley has an answer to me.
He did. He just raised his hand. Councilor O'Malley, Officer O'Malley.
Thank you very much, Councilor. I would have to just a little information is that it's a lot more common than you think, and there are in fact people within the Boston retirement system that through the State House have not been capped. Recently, a couple examples outside of Boston, because I know Boston hasn't had, thank God, 100% cases in several years. Mario Oliveira from up in Somerville and Robert DiNapoli were two that, their council of select people have written right into their dockets and petitions that they would not in fact be capped up at the State House. It is unique to different towns in different councils, but I know within Boston, there has been in the past, in fact, non-capped through the State House. Thank you.
Thank you. My other question was around another exception, or at least applying possibly Chapter 91 to this, which would, I think, prohibit the person who's receiving pension, disability pension, retirement allowance from the Commonwealth from basically working for the Commonwealth county, city, or town or district. And I was wondering if that was more encompassing of the limitations on, I guess, the concerns that I would have, that the person could be making. And I understand Councilor Sabi George and I disagree on whether it's making them whole or whether this is more than whole. And I do have honest concerns that a person who is getting 100% in their retirement, as though they are continuing to get the raises, continuing to get increased salary, to continue to have 100% of their salary as a police officer, but unable to perform their duties as a police officer, which I'm not. I hope people know, no one's doubting that. I feel that way. I've heard the officers, I've seen the impact. I understand intimately what PTSD feels like. So that's not a question. This is the question for me is, then why do they get the exception to the cap that other workers don't get? That's what's different. That's what's not about making them whole, right? Other retirees who go out injured, other retirees who leave at the 75% have that $15,000. It's $15,000 that they can make in other retirement. So that I'm I'm comfortable with looking at the 100%. I am comfortable with making sure the spouses are made whole. I think also, just for my colleagues' sake, we should check in with our colleagues at the State House to make sure that they have some more gender inclusive language and how they're describing officers and how they're describing some of the folks. That just saying we should, check in that we did our job. But in terms of this, I think we really need to be careful about the message that we're sending, and also to the retirement board. This is something that came to me, and this could be totally wrong, and I'd like to kill this rumor if it is wrong. What I was told, bedlam will happen. You do this, you could open up the floodgates because someone who was retired out could petition for a special act for themselves if they've already retired and they're at the $15,000 cap, and they decide, listen, hey, I think I'm deserving. My injury has caused me, I retired at this amount. Could they come back and ask for additional amount? Could they come back and ask for the 100%? Could they come back and ask for the cap to be removed for them? So this is to the retirement board.
I guess the answer is yes. They would have to go through your body. It's not something that the retirement board weighs in on or decides.
Okay, and again, that's why for me, it's the precedent that we're setting. It's the conversation and how we approach this, again, from the officer's injury and believing people when they say that they're in pain, right? Not questioning that, but also then moving to the financial impact of whatever decision we make, which we usually have that information in front of us for other financial decisions, to what are the exceptions. So we're looking at an exception, no cap for subsequent income that they can make. There's also the part of this Chapter 91 is that they wouldn't have to submit financial documents, so on and so forth. But I think that's directly, keenly related to the cap, not so much as them trying to hide anything. And so these are, I think, fair, good questions. And I want to make sure that we have fully vetted them as a body, because when we turn to the people of Boston and say, we've made a decision to grant these exceptions to the rule, I want to be able to say, and this is the precedent and what we went through in the conversation that we had to get there. I don't want, as Pam noted, one-off kind of conversations, because she is correct in that it doesn't create a stability or standard for those to understand. I see you, Councilor Flaherty. One second. Councilor Bach did have a question in between, so I want to go to her and then to you, Councilor Flaherty, but I do see you. So this is the point of this conversation. This is not about whether the officers serve this community, serve this city. We're willing to die for this city. This is not about their hearts. This is not about their character. This is not about their injury. This is literally asking practical questions about the standards we're going to set as 4 more officers are coming through. Councilor Bach, then Councilor Flaherty.
Sorry, it was just a very quick technical question to Tim, which was just when you gave us that 3.9 million this year snapshot, like how should we understand the distribution across those 58 people? Like if you divide that, you sort of say at $67,000 a head, but I imagine it's much more variable than that. And I just wanted to ask you.
It is far more variable, and I do have a spreadsheet of benefits paid that might be a little more helpful instead of me kind of guessing. I'd be happy to supply that.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Go ahead.
Because
sorry.
like I said at the beginning, 27 of these people, you're talking about benefits from the 50s. So obviously those benefits are going to be de minimis compared to somebody in today's dollars.
Right. I think it would be helpful to have that. I think that, and also to the point about what's a shorthand to Councilor Asabi George's question. I mean, it seems to me like, yeah, trying to play the actuarial estimation of all the X factors for some relatively young officers from now until, decades and decades from now might be tricky, but it might be illustrative for the council to understand what the annualized costs have been on the ones that were passed in 0405.
Right.
And I suspect those folks you presumably have in the spreadsheet. I wonder if there's a way to kind of to look at that and just understand what that annualized cost has been since those were passed, because it might be a good comparison point. And then the thing I'll just say, taking advantage of having the floor on the back and forth between Councilor Edwards and Asabi George about the cap. I mean, I'll admit to being really of two minds. I think on the one hand that I share some of Councilor Edwards's concerns about, like, you know, if the implication is we're doing this because folks have been so badly injured in the line of duty that, like, you know, that their livelihood's been taken from them, and so we're making it whole, to then sort of say, and also feel free to have a whole second livelihood. It is, you know, I think it's tricky for the public compared to kind of other situations where people don't get that type of support. However, I also think where I am sympathetic with Councilor Asabi George's point is that, you know, we've got several officers who were shot in the line of duty on behalf of the public who are struggling with trauma. And if you asked me if one of these officers were, like, subsequently to find a kind of, you know, to figure out like that there was some new career that gave them joy and kind of opened a new world for them, that was very different from policing, and started to pursue that, it does give me pause. Ironically, having watched Cliff Effects kind of box people in other parts of life, around housing benefit and stuff, like, it would give me pause to constrain them in a way that sort of said, like, discouraged you from finding those new paths in life. And especially, you know, and the reality is, unfortunately, we're dealing with several men who are really tragically young for us to be having this conversation at all. So I just, that's not a conclusive statement. That's sort of what I'm wrestling with here on this issue. But I'm happy to cede the floor to Councilor Flaherty.
Before you do, just for a point of clarification to the retirement board. So if someone is, I understood that they weren't necessarily, so if they made more than $15,000, if they made more than the cap, then they just wouldn't receive the difference, or their retirements would be adjusted. But it's not could you explain how that would happen? If I make more than the cap 1 year while I'm on retirement, what happens?
We recoup the overage.
So in layman's terms.
So if it's determined that you over-earned by, say, $10,000, we will take that $10,000 out of your pension until it's paid off.
So it's a balance. So they are free to pursue other works and if they make more than $15,000, the difference then is just, they don't get that plus the retirement. The retirement is then adjusted downwards.
Correct. To the extent that they over-earned. We figure out that right down to the penny. And whatever that dollar amount is what we see as an arrear. And we take that from the benefit.
So if my book becomes a bestseller when I talk about how I was on the job and I make $5 million, what happens?
I'm sorry, I was on mute, I apologize. If it's a substantial amount of money, we have advised people in the past to do what's called a waiver. So what they do is they don't take their pension, and then they can earn whatever amount they want. And I do think it's kind of worthy of note, and I don't want to complicate things, but you've got two different sections of Chapter 32. 91 Big B is only for disability folks. 91 small a and small b is for every public retiree. And that only pertains to work, if you go to work for a public employer, with the exception of the with a public employer, including the MBTA, I almost say with an exception.
Could you repeat that? 91 Big A is
Yep.
only, go ahead.
Big B.
Big B.
B is in boy. That is only pertains to disability retirees. And it does not matter who your employer is. You cannot make the difference between what your salary pays today, and then we subtract out what we pay you in pension money. It's that difference plus $15,000, whatever that figure is how much you can earn as a disability retiree, regardless of who your employer is. Could be Roach Brothers or it could be City of Boston. 91 it pertains to every retiree, and it talks as to whether or not you are working for a public employer. So if you're not working for a public employer and you're a regular superannuation retiree, you can earn as much money as you want.
Okay. All right, Counselor Flaherty, my apologies, Counselor Flaherty. I know you've been waiting.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just my position only is on one's ability to, in this particular instance, be be in law enforcement, be a cop and/or work in security. We've got the actuarians are not factoring in overtime and details that they potentially will be exposed through the remainder of their career. And we have situations where they're so young. In one particular instance, one of the individuals has 6 kids. So in the event that he regains the ability maybe to go back to school and earn a degree, or open up a coffee shop, or start a dog walking or dog training business, or starts a trauma or peer support consulting company, I don't think we should be standing in the way of that. I think our lane is to determine as to whether or not their ability to perform their function as a Boston police officer has been compromised, or in this particular instance, they're not capable of performing it anymore. And I think that's our decision moving forward, particularly that they're so young and many have young families. I'm not quite sure that we should be dictating as to whether or not they have the ability to secure a future income. Again, with the caveat that they can no longer be in law enforcement here or any other jurisdiction. They can no longer be in the security business and/or carry a firearm and/or work in corrections. And otherwise, I'm okay with that. I don't think we should be in the business of counting other people's money. We're making a determination about their fit, whether or not they're fit to continue to perform. That answer is clear based on the testimony and medical documentation evidence we have, and allowing them to move forward. And they may never be able to do anything, or in instances where they may down the road, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, have the ability to do something to enhance their financial security and/or to provide for their children. Not quite sure we want to be tipping on any scales here, but that's just my 2 cents. And again, through Tim, I guess the actuarian, they're only calculating their base salary. They're not factoring in multiple years of potential overtime and/or detail benefits that do come with being a Boston police officer. So we're factoring it all in. They leave a lot on the table, so to speak. And in these instances where they're so young and they have an upside of their life in front of them, I would caution as to whether we want to be in the business of curtailing their potential future income, provided that it's not in some type of law enforcement role. So that's my 2 cents on it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we could, let's see. I don't know if we've been joined by any other counselors. No. Just again, I'll just do a quick round then for folks in, if we want to do another. Martin O'Malley has raised his hand.
Thank you, Council, once again. I just want to piggyback what Council Flaherty said. He mentioned one of these individuals that have 6 children. To get the full picture, this individual, Harry Jean, has taken in family members' children. Those children are Jehovah's Witnesses. He had to move down to Georgia because he could not afford to live not only in the city of Boston, but also Massachusetts at this point. Talking about earnings in the future, this is an everyday anxiety for Harry. In addition to the other burdens that he's having now, that at some point he might try to attempt to put these 6 children into college. He might try to take a vacation with the children. The 100% sounds great, and it sounds like one would be able to live off of it. But the reality is that this day and age with 6 children that are looking at schools, and as a result of Harry having to put these children in based on the religion to private schools, it's not sustainable for him or his family. And he will suffer. I don't think that anybody should put any restraints on Harry Jean because he almost lost his life and had to take a life of another. That's the reality of it. You know, he didn't choose to have the 6 children. If he did, that's fine. But at this point, you know, he's doing God's work by taking kids in and trying to do the best he can for them. And I'll end on that. But thank you very much for your time.
And thank you. And I want to be very clear. You know, the conversation we're having, I don't even know that I feel that it's a back and forth or any kind of tension. It's perspectives coming and asking, I think, fair questions. And while I understand Councilor Flaherty and some of my other colleagues understanding that you shouldn't count other people's money, in making that argument, then it's very hard for me to say I shouldn't count other people's money and then talk about how they want to go on vacation, how they're going to pay for school, how they're going to do other things as well. So if I'm not going to count their money, then I shouldn't also be making their budgets for them either. And I don't say that to be harsh, but I don't want this to be a form of emotional blackmail either. I want to be talking about the numbers and the standards that we're setting in this body. There are, thank God, not very many people who have 100%, as Officer O'Malley had mentioned before. Thank God for that. Detective O'Malley, I'm sorry if I've gotten your ranking correct. But I want to be very clear that the standards that we set is so that we don't have the emotions and the moments kind of in there, because I'm going to be inclined to open up, open up the purse and open up whatever to make sure that someone feels better because they've gone through a traumatic experience. And so again, looking to the Research Municipal Bureau and the standards that we're setting and the questions that we're asking, these should be all part of the system and the part of the analysis that we have. And that's all I'm trying to do. So I have right now some outstanding things that we'd like to get, some sooner rather than later. That's the financial commitment or the expected costs for each of the individuals. We understand to be down to the penny will probably take longer than we'd like. So we were asking if there's some at least analysis based on the 2004, 2005, the 5 ones that we've had, to give us a range. Maybe that would be helpful. We're not going to hold anyone liable for that. I think the retirement board had mentioned in Boston that they had not heard of any other person or any other group getting a cap before, or excuse me, having the cap removed. Yeah. I know Officer O'Malley had mentioned that. I see you, Larry Calderon. I will call on you 1 second. He had mentioned that there were some exceptions in other cities, but let's just confirm that or not, if these exceptions are really that new. And then I'm gonna have probably to do my own the waiver. The waiver is interesting to me about how if someone over earns or has an overage, how many waivers have been sought in the past? That would be another question I'm curious for the retirement board and how this balancing act actually works. I don't, again, I just want to know that I've turned over every single stone. I've looked at every perspective, and I've pushed for this. And so people understand what my role is after doing all that, I try to get consensus of my colleagues and present before the body each one of these individual things, ideally recommending what I think is the consensus around to vote for it. And so I want to be able to get ahead of questions that we're going to receive. I want to be able to look at the laws, the impacts of the laws and decisions that we make, and also know that there are 4 other officers coming, and maybe more, which is their absolute right, by the way. This is not a question that they should or shouldn't come. I'm going to go to Larry, then I'm going to go through a whole another round for counselors to ask any final questions or thoughts or any other information they'd like to have. I think that would be very helpful. Larry Calderon.
Thank you, Councilor. Good morning to everybody that's taken part in this morning. It's been a long haul to get to where we are today. But I guess my comments, like yours, Councilor, none of this is personal, but we seem to be going back and forth over amounts of money that If I have it correct, when I joined, I was listening to Pam speak about $46,000 a year. And when I look at the city of Boston budget, we're spending an awful lot more money than $46,000 that we're discussing here. For police officers that are asked to answer those emergency 911 calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And although I know we all have our jobs to do, whether it be elected officials or otherwise, consideration has to be given to these police officers, because whether it's you or I or anybody else that's on this call is dialing 911 for our loved ones and our safety, we expect those officers to show up. And it is our duty as elected officials, as citizens of the public, to make sure that we take care of these officers when they're injured like this, to this extreme in the line of duty. I hear a lot of conversation back and forth about what the cost might be. This is a minimal cost, in my opinion, to taking care of a member and their family. It should be considered whether or not that child is going to be properly fed, clothed, or how they might go to college. And truth be told, even the 100% benefit that we are asking for, that we hope will go through, is still approximately 40 to maybe 50% less than an officer would make with forced overtime and private work. So I sit here very patiently waiting my turn, and I hope that I'm not being overly aggressive in any way, but these officers have waited an awful long time. This has gone on now in the last 2 to 3 council sessions. No disrespect to you, Councilor Edwards. I know you've been extremely helpful in shepherding this with the other councilors on board here. Councilor George, or obviously Councilor Flaherty. But it's just an awful long time to keep continually asking these officers to wait, having them log on and listen to the same questions, having them have to deal with added stress in their life from what they have already received. When they did their jobs, they answered that call for service, and they suffered grave injuries because of it. This really should not be this difficult. I appreciate everybody's time. Please let me know how I can be of any use to anyone in finding out any information. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you very much, Larry. So we're just going to go back through the order. We'll start with the lead sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any other questions. I appreciate everyone's thoughtfulness today in both the discussion specific to the 3 petitions before us, as well as the more sort of broad template planning questions asked by you, Chair, and Councilor Bach. I will say that it is really important that we move this quickly, so I appreciate the opportunity to base some of the dollar amounts on estimates of the last petition, as we are very much bumping up against a hard stop on a calendar in which to deliver this to the State House. So, Madam Chair, respectfully, I do ask that we move quickly on this matter, on these matters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilor Sabi George. I think Councilor Flynn may have gone. Yep, so Councilor Bach.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And a quick question. A first question that I have for is it Detective O'Malley? Sorry, excuse me, forgive me, sir. And also for Larry, just has there been any effort to change this systematically at the State House such that you wouldn't have to do this piece through special laws this way?
I don't know if Larry Calderoni, Councilor, I don't know if he wanted me or Detective O'Malley first. There seems to be a lot of confusion when you deal with elected officials on Beacon Hill as well when it comes to matters like this. In the city of Boston, the way it is set up is that we must have the home rule petition signed off by the majority of the council and the mayor, which then formulates the bill and goes to the State House for the legislative process. What we have experienced, both myself, many of the detectives and their lobbyists up on the Hill over the last several years, dealing with outside Boston, but yet still within our law enforcement family, is certain representatives will tweak and change pieces of legislation as they go committee to committee. the same as the council process would move on. Councils get together and there's conversations to be had, and the legislation as it's being formulated changes from committee to committee. So like at the State House level, it's no different. Some chairmen, specifically one past now retired of Ways and Means on the House side, was intricate in changing the language to have a cap because in his opinion, not that I speak for him, but in the conversations that were had, they were trying to set a precedent where all individuals in law enforcement would be treated the same. The unfortunate part that we do have, Counselor, and my long answer is, yes, legislation gets changed repeatedly, both at the council level and the House level. And whether or not the 60 members up at the State House on the House side or the 40 other senators are doing anything at all to change the way the process is done is unbeknownst to me in this new legislative session.
Thank you. Detective O'Malley, do you have anything to add about this? In terms of
Well, thank you. Yeah, like Larry said, our lobbyist, Larry, works with him on a regular basis. I'll piggyback what he said, that there has been individual bills passed and representatives up at the State House that will tweak them for us. Besides that, I have nothing to add on that subject. I just want to, once again, on behalf of the Boston Police Detectives, but I'm going to thank everybody for their time. And we appreciate all the cooperation that you have given us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, no, and I asked that because I do think that there's partly here a sort of philosophical argument that when we have officers injured in the line of duty and especially shot in the line of duty, that there should be this additional benefit. And I think that to the system's point, right, the best solution would be for the state law to read differently on that front, because then we wouldn't be doing one-off petitions. So just wanted to register that. And so two things, Madam Chair. One is just, and these are really mostly, I think, echoes of your information requests. But I think certainly it would be great to have from Tim that the summary of Fund 2 that I think you said you had from June 30th, Tim, already. And then I think, yeah, an anonymized like spreadsheet of the payouts to the petitions that went through in 0405. So specifically those people, just so that like we can get a sense of what the kind of annual has looked like there. And then I think it would be great if we could get from Detective O'Malley or someone else those Somerville home rule petitions that were referenced for comparison. I think those are kind of the three things information-wise that would be helpful. In terms of just some quick thoughts I have on language, because my instinct, again, as I said at the start, is that we should be establishing a standard that we can then, so that like this hearing is frankly difficult. I think like this hearing and working session process has been difficult because of the way that it's intertwined with individuals' lives, and also we're trying to do it on a policy basis. But I think if we could just have a standard and the council kind of was like, that's what we're doing, then in the future when these came up, it would be much easier for everybody involved. So a couple of thoughts I have on that. One is, we in the home rule description, we talk about how the person sustained serious injuries in the line of duty. I wonder if we want to say serious injuries resulting from firearms on the line of duty. The reason I say that is because I am very sympathetic to the idea that we have a culture saturated in gun violence right now, and that's a really scary aspect of what our officers face, and that the idea that that's maybe part of the line, it seems to me like that's operating here in all of these cases. And that being able to say that whatever additional thing we're providing is something that the council provides when people are shot in the line of duty might make a cleaner precedent for the future. So that's one little note. And then on the 91A front, I wonder, and this is very much offered in the spirit of sort of like suggestion of compromise and suggestion, but I wonder if we could shift the language so that 91A still applies in the sense of the financial, you have to, in the sense of having to submit the annual paperwork. And this is different, by the way, I should say, from, this is financial paperwork, right? Totally different from the point about reevaluation, which like I agree with Councilor George. I don't think we want to be constantly pulling people up for a mental health reevaluation. But I wonder if we could be like 91A still applies, except that, and lift the cap substantially. So not completely eliminate it, but do something like $100,000 or like something that's basically like, because there is some point, I think, at which it would be awkward for the city if somebody was earning like a certain sort of amount of money, and then we were also paying them this full thing. I just think that there is a, I have some kind of fiduciary disquiet about that. And I also, you know, think that it isn't ideal that the way that our police compensation is structured is in a way that, you know, incentivizes the heavy pursuit of overtime and details, which then are part of what is making this less remunerative. But I wonder if there's a way to keep the financial oversight, but significantly raise the cap without eliminating it, and then say, you know, this is for officers who get shot at in the line of duty, and kind of make that. But that's just me, you know, thinking on the fly here in response to some of what's been said. So just offer it, Madam Chair, in the spirit of suggestion. But those are my comments about sort of things I would want to see, and some thoughts. Thanks.
So just specifically on 91, making sure that there's financial disclosures, but not dealing with the cap?
Oh, no, what you would do is you would leave 91A applying, but you would just say, except that where it says 15,000, we're substituting the number 100. So it'd basically be like you'd make the same mechanism apply, but you would just say, like, for these, we have a much higher cap, but you wouldn't eliminate the cap completely. And what's nice about that is that you could just substitute that number, but keep the rest of the oversight language in 91A without, because I don't think we want to get in the business of rewriting 91A in detail, if you see what I mean. So that is just a thought, but.
I see you, Larry. I'm going to go through counselors real quick and then come to you. Is that okay? Counselor, I think Braden had left. Counselor Flaherty.
Madam Chair. No more questions, Madam Chair.
Okay. So again, just real quick, I do appreciate the quick.
Councilor Janey is still with us, Madam Chair.
Counselor Janey, my apologies.
Councilor Asabi George, thank you, Madam Chair. No questions for me. A very thoughtful conversation. Intent on listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quickly, and I appreciate the cap of some of the things we've requested, Councilor Bach, and I do look forward to getting those things. I think the only other was to add to that list was, again, the waiver. If there has been waiver sought before in the past, that was something I wanted to also see. And then also, let's see, we discussed what caps were sought in Boston, waivers sought, yeah, the actuary, you know, of the or estimates, I should say, of the cost. And then I don't know. I mean, the 100,000 is interesting. That's new, Councilor Bach, in terms of a number for just a raise. Basically, have a cap but raise it is your suggestion.
Yeah, my suggestion is that it's not a cap that's kicking in, you know, early in somebody pursuing a new thing, but it is a cap that like has some cutoff for kind of a you know, comfort test for us, as, you know, if it came back, oh, somebody's earning. I just think I think the reality is that there's a point at which it would start to be uncomfortable for the city, but that you could allow significantly more running room in these cases because of some of the conditions that we've talked about. I don't know. It's just a thought for me.
Well, I think it's also, you know, just doing some back of the envelope math. It's allowing the person to at least make more than minimum wage, right? The $15 an hour fight that a lot of people are fighting for. If you work for 40 hours a week at $15 an hour, let's say grocery store or something like that, you would make $28,000. So, you know, that is something I hope the State House looks at in terms of the cap in general. If you're going to have a cap, it should be at least keeping with minimum wage. So I understand that, and it does certainly comfort me that there's a talk about us within our own standards about how we could have a balanced approach and look at that. I'll go to Larry, and then I'll see what my colleagues that are left think about just raising the cap. So Larry.
Thanks again, Council. Actually, it was asked by you of Councilor Bach. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what she had stated on the 100,000 cap. Thank you both. Appreciate you calling me.
Mm-hmm. We can go back to the lead sponsor.
I think that the idea of raising the cap is an interesting point. I do want to note, and I think Larry may have alluded to this, or Marty, around there's a lot of forced overtime when it comes to police officers. It's not simply just accepting and taking details. There's quite a bit of forced overtime. So I think that the conversation around lifting the cap is certainly an interesting one, and I think one that is worth further discussion, especially looking at some of these other documents that we've requested. And so what I'd like to do is hopefully we can square that away by the end of this week, both collecting that information. Tim, if that's something that you can share with us by the end of the week, and then having a sort of a follow-up, just brief conversation, perhaps between myself and Madam Chair, regarding lifting the cap.
We can get you as much information as you need, Counselor.
Thank you very much. That'll be very helpful to allow for us to move as, I think, as fiscally responsible and as judicious as possible and as fast as possible, and balancing all of those different perspectives. So with that, unless anyone has any concluding remarks, any other questions? I see the lead sponsor is fine. Councilor Bach, you're fine. Councilor Janey may have had to go.
No,
Yep.
I'm good. Thank you.
Councilor Flaherty. I think he's good. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this working session. Thank you.
I'm good.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flaherty. With that, thank you so much for attending.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.